My name is Jamie Staten, and I'm the Family Engagement Specialist here at TRECA. And today we're going to be talking about some different testing topics. We will have some time for question and answer, either at the end of each section or at the end. So at that time, you can either unmute yourself and ask the question or type it in the chat box, whatever you're more comfortable with. But today we're going to be talking about student and family preparation before the test, tips for during the test anxiety, and how to interpret test results. And we have a few different members from our staff that are going to be walking us through these topics. We have Mrs. Kearns and Mr. Miller from our teaching staff, and then Mrs. Ballinger and Mrs. Tafe, our school counselors. So at this time, I will go ahead and hand it over to them.
Thanks, Mrs. Staten. I'll go first. My name is Mr. Miller. I teach at the high school level. For those that don't know who I am, I teach American history and psychology. So American history is one of the tests that your child will see if they're enrolled in that class during this round. We have a kind of a unique insight because we prepare our American history students for the state test. So I'll inject some of my personal knowledge about it as we move through the slides. So we'll go over a couple different things. We kind of split it into two parts, being mentally prepared and physically prepared to get yourself or to get your student in the right frame of mind as they go to the test sites. So one of the most important, obviously, is getting enough rest before the test. So try to get some good sleep. A couple nights ago, I didn't sleep very well, and you could feel it the whole day. So last night, I tried to have some sleepy time tea. So whatever it takes for you to sleep well the night before, or your student, try to have them do that. Have a positive mind, a positive mood. All that kind of stems from getting a good night's sleep. And then set an alarm, whether that's on your phone or an old-fashioned alarm. Here at my house, we have both. Find a really annoying alarm tone, so it'll force you to shut it off and get up. So I'll toss it over to Mrs. Kearns. We're going to kind of rotate back and forth between some of these slides.
I'm Mrs. Kearns. I also teach here. I'm at the high school. I teach math. I teach Algebra 2, which is not a tested course, but if you do have a child that is in my class, they still might be taking the Algebra 1 test. So to continue on what we were talking about with the test tips, plan your meals. Make sure you have a good breakfast. Sometimes test days are long, and if you set an alarm and get up late and rush to testing and don't have anything, you don't have any fuel in your system, you're going to putter out early, and that's not what you want to do. So make sure you not only have a good breakfast, but having a nice dinner the night before, a healthy dinner, at an appropriate time will also help you. And I know we say try to avoid caffeine right before the test. I don't know if you want to drink a giant monster drink, but I'm sure, like, I know some kids come with their Dunkin' because that's what wakes them up. I totally get it because that's what wakes me up. So, do whatever works for you, and plan a reward. Like we say, testing is hard. It's hard for the parent. It's hard for the student. I'm a mother of 3 teen and college and high school students. They take a lot of tests. I think I get more stressed out than they do. So give yourself a little bit of grace as a parent, and maybe think of something that you can do after the test. If it's, swing through their favorite drive-through or go for a walk if the weather's nice, anything. That's a good idea. Just something that that you'll get to do after the test.
So to continue with before the test tips, any kind of pre-test ritual that you can adopt for your child will be really helpful. Some that we've talked about in the past or heard students do. Listening to music always helps, taking a short walk, just anything to kind of reduce nerves if that's an issue that you have with your child. The middle one, finding out as much as you can about the test. There are a ton of resources out there for finding out about the test. There's practice ones from years gone by. You can simulate it, the test conditions when you go onto the practice site that's operated by the Ohio Department of Education. There's just lots of different things out there. If you're just using my class as an example for American history, we have a separate folder in there with a bunch of links and resources. So check with your science or math or English or social studies, whatever grade your child is in, they should point you in the right direction, or advisor or guidance counselor. And then to go along with that, the last one on the slide is practice. I can't stress it enough. Have your child take practice exams. Do the best that you can to simulate a test environment. Have them sit for 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, the best. Try to find a quiet spot for them to simulate what it's like to take the test if they haven't done so before.
One more slide of before the test tips. So bring your Trekka iPhone if you have one, and I would bring an extra layer of clothes, meaning a sweatshirt or a comfortable jacket, depending on what room you're testing in or where you're going to be. Sometimes it's a little bit chilly. I don't think there's many areas that you're going to be too warm at this point, but you never know with the weather in Ohio. I'm up in the Cleveland area. I don't think I've ever worn short sleeves to our testing site, but you never know. You do not need your computer. You do not need a calculator. That's built into the testing program if you end up using a calculator. So you really just need your Trekka iPhone. And we use the Trekka iPhone as backup if there's some crazy thing that happens with the internet. We just use it as a hotspot, but it's really just an extra precaution. So if you have one, just grab it and bring it with you.
A couple more items on the before the test. Testing letters, testing phone calls, things like that should be out now. You might receive a phone call from the proctors at your test site or at your child's test site. I'll be testing in the Columbus area, so I'll be making calls today and tomorrow, most likely to all the students that are assigned to my test site. Please do the best that you can to arrive early for two reasons. Mainly, number one is so your child can use the bathroom before the test, and two, if they like to sit in the back or if they like to sit in the front or on the side, there'll be an opportunity for them to pick a good seat. Those would be the two that I've heard from students in the past. If you've never been to the site before, it might be a good idea to do a trial drive, if you can manage it, maybe the day before, to make sure there's no issues the day of. And then most of our students will have a phone. If they don't have a phone, then the proctors will have a phone. So they'll be able to get in touch with you for pickup plans. So make sure that you have something set up with your child on where you're going to pick them up, how long they're going to be at the test site, just so you have something in plan so you don't have to stress about it too much the day of the test.
Sometimes my mouse goes to sleep and I can't find it. Okay, just a couple more things. And these are more directed towards your child, your student. So, and I know that this is a group of parents. So these are things you might just want to remind your child that they just need to be quiet and considerate of others when they're entering the testing site, and you as well. Make sure they're just focused on themselves, get to a desk, sit where it's appropriate for them, be ready for the test when we're going over the instructions, and just let them know to stay calm. So I think that's, like I said, these are more geared to your child, but you can remind them of those things.
All right. So remember, if you have any questions about before the test, you can enter them into the chat area. We'll move on for tips for during the test. So one of the things that you want to do is something that we call test wiseness. So that's just sort of getting into the mindset of making sure everything is set for that day and what you can do while you're taking the test to ensure that your child is getting or is the most successful that they can be. So these are a couple strategies that we use. So the skills and strategies plus the knowledge that your child is bringing into the test will help them be successful on the test, whatever test they're taking.
During the test, there's scratch paper provided to your child. You know, make sure when you're talking to them on the drive or the night before, just remind them that they will be getting scratch paper and it's a good idea to use it, especially when you're mapping stuff out. Even if you're mapping out your essay, it's just a good idea to use your scratch paper and use all the built-in tools. There's line readers, there's highlighters, there's going to be calculators. Make sure that they utilize those tools, and we go over them in the testing room, but and make sure they ask us any questions that they have while we're in the testing room, of course, about them as well.
One thing, I don't know if it's covered on here, but one of the tools that they have is Zoom. So I know just from walking around the test room, some students, I can kind of, you can tell if your child has glasses or if they have any kind of vision issue, just remind them that there's a Zoom function. And if they can't find it, ask the proctors that are there, because sometimes I'll see students that are really close to the screen and they haven't zoomed in. So just something to pay attention to. So during the test tips, there's two of them on this slide. One is reading each question carefully and answer every question. There'll be a part where typically the proctor will ask students if and when they are done with a particular part. There'll be, every question has like a square. So there'll be, let's say there's 20 questions on a particular part. They'll have 20 squares at the end. And if a student doesn't answer a question or answers it in a way that the computer doesn't recognize, it'll put like a yield sign on it. So encourage your student to answer every single question, even if they're not sure what it is. Take a guess, because you're penalized if you don't answer. So make sure you're answering, or that your child is answering every questions. And then they should have some strategies from their teachers about multiple choice questions. There's all sorts of different kinds. So that's why practicing is a good idea, to get exposed to all the different kinds of questions that are out there.
Don't leave the essay blank on the English test. It is about a third of your test points. So just, tell your child, do not just look at it, panic, and turn their test in. Like, it has to be completed, and they need to do the best that they can. Tell them to use paragraphs, include details from the reading passage, and just make sure they write and write and write. I want to say quantity is better than quality. However, with no quantity, that's a huge red flag to the graders, readers, whatever you want to call them. And make sure you take a look at the essay prompt. So sometimes there'll be a passage and an essay prompt. So tell your child, read the question first and then read the passage. You can do that. It's okay. Then they'll know what they're looking for in the passage.
Yeah, Mrs. Kearns and I are not English teachers, so I would encourage you, if you're not sure if your child is taking an English part and there's an essay, go find examples so they can practice. So on here, we've got a couple more during the test. It's okay to take breaks. I know a lot of the parents in here, you haven't been in a testing room, but a lot of the students, they just sit the entire time. So I don't know about you, but once I hit about 45 minutes of sitting, I get a little antsy. So tell your student it's fine to get up. We can pause tests. It doesn't count against them as far as the time goes. Go walk around the library, go out into a parking lot, get some fresh air. Everyone in here knows that that sort of clears your mind. So I would encourage your student to get up and move around every once in a while, just to kind of get the brain moving. And then if, again, you know your child the best. So if they like to snack during the day, I know there's restrictions on certain kinds of allergies and stuff. So just make sure in certain sites, there might be some students that are allergic to this or that. So if they want to eat, maybe they can eat outside or in the hallway or something, because I know that we're, especially like with peanut allergies, you just want to be a little bit careful. So if they have a snack, they might be asked to eat it outside somewhere or not in the actual testing room.
And on the other slide, it said each part you have an average of 90 minutes, which is 3 hours for the test. So that's why Mr. Miller was saying, you might finish part one and you might need to wiggle or move or have a snack or something, because on this slide, we're telling you to use all of the time. There's nothing more disheartening as a proctor when a child is done with their test in 20 minutes, because we know how long you're supposed to take on a test. So make sure that they take the time, they read over their questions, and they do their very best, and tell them do not leave questions blank. Some tests you'll take and they tell you to, that wrong answers count worse than blank answers. That is not the case here. They want to have an answer in every single answer blank, and especially any writing prompt. So make sure they know that.
Yeah, great point. You would be kind of surprised, some of the students, how little time they take on the exam. And I tend to ask them, and most of them are like, well, I didn't prepare myself. So we still have a week or so left. So just do your best to just encourage your student and get them as prepared as they can for the test. So we're now moving into after the test. So just a couple basic tips for what you can do to sort of make it a little easier. Take time to reflect. How do you think you did? What did you do correctly? What can you improve on? Think positively about how you did. Students might be testing on April 9th and then April 16th. So there might be a gap in between some of the tests. So if you arrive late on April 9th, maybe you can reflect and prepare for the next time you test. Might be the next day, it might be the next afternoon. What would you do differently on the next test? Just some things to think about after the test is over. And most importantly, don't forget to celebrate, especially on your last day of testing.
That was supposed to be my slide. I thought we worked it backwards, so I got to do the celebrate one.
You can go back.
I'm kidding. I'll do the first test anxiety one. But yes, make sure when your kid goes through something like that, the last thing you want to do is, maybe ask them how they did, but then, it's over. It's over. You don't have to talk about every single X and Y, in my case for algebra. It's over. Let them breathe. Because I'm sure 99% of them will have test anxiety while they're in that room. So as it says, almost all students get anxious when it comes time to take a big test. I know I do when we have the littlest tests. Nervous butterflies are normal. However, sometimes a student's anxiety may feel intense, and there's many ways to overcome test anxiety.
So we tend to split it up into 3 different ways that students might be anxious about a test: behavioral, emotional, and physical. So just picking one from each, a student might have a pounding heart. They might have poor concentration on that day. They might shut down. They might not want to go. So we've seen it all at the different test sites, just from talking to students and parents and just being really honest about how they're feeling. And I think step one is recognizing the feelings that you have and knowing that every single student in there is going through the same thing that you are. So hopefully that your child is. So hopefully that's some sort of comfort that everybody in there, you're not the only one that's feeling anxious.
I'm feeling kind of anxious right now, and I just remembered something. Wait, can you go back 1 second? Okay, under emotional, this is what happens to me all the times, and this is the time, and this is what I tell students to do. Under emotional, it says weak memory. As soon as I sit down to take a test, I feel like my brain's an Etch-a-Sketch, and they just shook it. It's blank. I forget everything. I just complete panic. So what I like to tell the students is, especially when they're taking the math test, we're going to pass out formula sheets, and they're going to have formulas on them. Obviously, they don't have to write the formulas down, but it's okay to stop and look at this stuff and write notes to yourself before you get to question 17 and your brain's all jumbled. So make sure you tell them when they get their little formula sheet, if they want to write notes to themselves, like, don't forget to multiply the numbers together when you're finding circumference, or whatever things that are in their brains that they're afraid that it's going to evaporate from their test anxiety. Tell them to write it down on that sheet. See, I would have forgot. Okay, now mine. Take several deep breaths. Obviously, especially if the test gets overwhelming, you can close your eyes, take a couple breaths, and get back at it. Tense your muscles and hold them for 10 seconds, then relax, so they can do that while they're getting ready to start the test. Close your eyes and imagine a peaceful, quiet setting like a beach or a forest. So I giggle when that kind of stuff happens. It's okay if your students do too, because they're going to be in an awkward setting with awkward people. And sometimes when you're in awkward settings with awkward people, you giggle because that's just what your body does. We understand that. We are teachers. So remind them that we're nice teachers.
Another great tip is engaging in positive self-talk. So talk this through with your child. Examples could be, I am going to do my very best on this test. This is a challenge, but challenges help me grow. I think that's probably my favorite one on the page, is that the tests aren't meant to be easy, but they are challenges. And if we go along with challenges and do the best that we can learn from that and get some grit. And that's a good word that we all of our students should know, is just coming to the test site, taking the test. That should just be something that they're proud of, period. So just think of it as more of a challenge, and hopefully that's a good tip to reduce some anxiety. Another one right smack in the middle is I've studied hard and I am prepared for the test. So that's a great way to, that for me, that could be the number one is the more you study, the less anxious you get, hopefully.
I am Mrs. Tafe, the K-8 school counselor, and I'm going to be talking about interpreting results for my grade levels. So, so the state testing for 3 through 8 is just to see where your student is, academically at this time in their grade level. Ideally, students would want to shoot for 700 and above, so proficient and above. But if your student gets lower than that, and that just helps the teachers see, what needs to be worked on, what maybe your student needs help with. 3 through 8, I'll take math and ELA, but only grades 5 and 8 take science. So those are some differences. We can go on to the next slide. And so these are the scores for ELA. So I had to put them on different slides, but that's kind of the range you're looking at. Like I said, 700 and above would be what you would want to shoot for. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so there have been some changes in the 3rd grade testing. So the 3rd grade reading testing is, it takes place in the fall, the spring, and the summer, while, other grades, their testing is just in the spring. So, the reading score that they're wanting to meet promotion for 3rd graders this year is a 690. Last year I think it was a 685. So each year they keep moving it up a little bit. So, what you would want your student to shoot for would be a 690 or above. Now, if your student doesn't meet that score, if they receive, they earn a 48 or higher on the reading sub-score, then they'll also be eligible for promotions. They kind of give you two chances or two different scores to meet that requirement for promotion for the third grade reading guarantee. And like I said, your student, if they don't do that great in the spring one, they will have an opportunity in the summer to take the reading portion again. And even though the KRA was done in the fall, I still want to touch on it. So the KRA, the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment, is a little different than the regular state testing. It's kind of an observation that the teachers and staff do with the kindergarten students. It addresses growth in language and literacy, social foundations, mathematics, and well-being, and motor development. So it kind of goes under the scoring categories of demonstrating readiness, approaching readiness, and emerging readiness, which, the higher the score, the higher they did on those observations. But the only difference in the scoring is that the language and literacy scores on track would be 263 to 298. So that's the difference in what you're seeing there, is that one type of score is a little different. But I did want to touch on the KRA, even though it happened in the fall, just in case you have another little one who's entering kindergarten this coming fall. We can go ahead to Mrs. Ballinger, who will handle the high school testing.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Ballinger, and I work with high schoolers, specifically students whose last names start with the letters L through RO. So I don't want to overwhelm with too much information about how to interpret. Ultimately, we're always here to help you interpret those results. I know there's so many rules, and it's constantly changing, it seems like. So, but basically, there are three components to graduation. One is credits, one is competency, and one is readiness. For competency, students have to earn a certain score on their Algebra 1 and English 2 tests. For readiness, they have to earn 2 graduation seals. So that's what it all comes down to. This slide says how to interpret end of course exams. Depending on how high they score on them, they might have a limited, basic, proficient, accelerated, or advanced level. Basically, what they're shooting for is proficient or above. For most of them, it gets kind of confusing because the new competency score actually falls into the basic range. So this is more suitable to the students who started high school before 2019. So I think we'll just move on to the next slide. How to interpret end of course exam TOC results. For the students who started in 19 and beyond, so the cohort of 2023 students who are planning on graduating from 2023 and beyond. Again, they on their English 2 and their Algebra 1 test, they need to score a 684 or above to meet competency for graduation, which is nice. It used to be 700 if they needed to be proficient, but if they get a 684, then they don't need to test again. If they do not get the 684, then we will identify them to try it again. Some students who've already tried it and didn't quite meet that score. They may have algebra end of course prep or English end of course prep on their schedule. That's very beneficial in preparing to retest to try to make that score. If they've tried a couple of times and they just can't meet that score, we do have alternative pathways. So I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, if I don't get to 684, I'm not going to graduate. Talk about test anxiety. So there are alternative pathways, and we will discuss that with students as needed. Looking at the American history, American government, and biology tests, I guess I should have said there are 6 tests altogether, English 2, Algebra 1, Geometry, Biology, American History, and American Government. If a student earns a 700 or higher on their biology end of course exam, they get the science seal. Remember, we talked about readiness and having to earn 2 seals. If they earn a 700 or above on their American History and their American Government end of course exams, then they get the citizenship seal. There are lots of different seals students can earn. So again, don't feel like they have to earn those scores on those tests. It's just nice to get those seals out of the way with the end of course exams if they can. So again, it's very helpful if they just do their very best and really show what they know, because then they can cross off a lot of the requirements for graduation without having to go further and take more classes and work for different seals. How can I see where my student stands toward state testing requirements? When you go into your parent portal, you'll see this. If you click on assessments, that's highlighted here in red, you'll see some of the scores of the past assessments. You can also always ask the counselor, and even the advisors know that too. They know where to find that and Evolve. And then once you click that assessments, this is the screen that you'll see. Again, I don't expect you to remember what all of these scores mean. If you want to, then 684 is the magic number for Algebra and English 2, and 700 is the magic number for Biology, American History, and American Government. But don't feel like you have to know all this. Ask us anytime. We'd be glad to help you with this information.